Abandon us. Okay, now we are on custom live streaming service.
Yes, we are live on custom live streaming service.
So hello
This
everybody,
custom,
whoever is joined in.
yeah. Hello everybody. Hello from us at Just Learning. Hello to Aman and Lakshmi this evening. This is roughly the 20th episode, almost the 20th episode of Lawyers, Artists, and Others Talk Law, Love, and Equity. This is a series that we started because we were super inspired by, the idea of having conversations which were inspired by love for beauty and love for wisdom. We think we don't have enough of that in the media that we consume. It's more often than not. Actually, you're live, actually. I can see you, actually. When you make these faces, it's very hard for me to hold my face together.
Sorry.
But thank you. It was an entirely respectable statement. But we live in a time where it's not very easy to smile, and I'm very happy to have the two of you here because I've never not seen you smile, and that's really. I mean, there's so much to learn from that. First of all, even before we get into anything else. And the reason why we do this series is because one, we feel like our media can be more interesting, and the second, we feel, as citizens, there are only these many ways that we can participate in civic conversations. And the first of it requires a certain measure of empathy. And if you don't have access to slowness, slow conversations, contemplativeness, it's very hard to do justice in the world around us, right? And so that's why we do this series. And so today we have Aman and Lakshmi. Aman and Lakshmi are both artists, writers, educators, and they've worked in a variety of careers over they've had many careers within their career, but the lives within each of these careers that they've encountered and touched and been touched by is far more immense to truly capture, I suppose, over the next 1.5 hours. So before we get into trying to attempt to capture any of these things, let's start with the first question that we ask everyone who joins us on this exercise, right? So we ask whoever joins us to introduce themselves without talking about what they do or where they're from. Yeah. So can you both tell us a little bit about yourselves without talking about what you do and where you're from?
You go.
Go ahead.
Well, so my name is Aman. So I'm just a human being. I'm a slightly curious sort. I like following things up. I like seeing things differently. I like, what do I say? I shouldn't talk about what I do. So let me just end with saying I hate long nails in my hands. Like I keep my nails very short.
That's good.
I have understood that you do things, but I have understood nothing about you. I mean, I wonder if I should refer to you as the guy with the not long nails on his hand, a man of a curious sort.
With not long nails.
A man with long nails. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Got it.
Yeah.
I have truly understood your soul now. Yeah. Lakshmi, what about yourself? Aman, please try to do a little better about it. Tell us about your dreams. Tell us about your
long and painted, so I can't take that line. I don't know, man. I like seeing the world. I like understanding the world, assimilating what is happening, processing it, making meaning in my own head about it. And maybe if I feel like I create something out of it, and yeah.
Okay. That's better than having short nails on your hand at some distance. Okay, I do think these are worthy qualifications. Thank you for joining us. And let's start talking about some of the things that both of you have cared about in the world over the years. And I want to ask you both a question, which is, over the course of the lives you've led, what are a couple of things that you've learned that you think everyone in the world should know, right? And I'd invite you to talk about it from the various fields that you worked in, one by one. So, and with Aman particularly, I want to ask about Punjab. We had put together this poster where we spelled Punjab as Punjab, and you said we should change the name of this, and you asked us to spell it as Panjab. And I've read a little bit about this, and I'm very curious to know what you've learned about Punjab and your experience growing up and living in working with Punjab as a site all of these years that you think everyone should know about Punjab.
Oh my God, that's a very big question. It will take more than 1.5 hours to answer. And what have I learned about Punjab? I mean, what do you learn about
That you
breathing?
think no. What have you learned that you think everyone should know? I mean, we know some things about the ways of the world, but I feel like if you were to pick a few facts that are not of common knowledge, what do you think we should know about Punjab?
Okay.
What?
Okay, then if everybody has to know one thing about Punjab, and which should help them see things a little more clearly. And now we go back to what I was saying earlier. I like to see and understand and then articulate them. So I'm a writer. Is that everything that they know about Punjab, they should look at it as an act of resistance. Because geographically, historically, linguistically, in every way you look at it, ethnically, religiously, identity-wise, Punjab has been the gateway of the Indian subcontinent for millennia. It's not new, it's not a new place. And billions of people would have walked in through that little Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, there's a little pass there through which they came into the Indian subcontinent. And these people who are at the gate of your house, they are being constantly battered. And then the battering guys, they walk on and some of them are left behind and they become the guys who are being battered. So it's like it's a process. So Punjab is also, to my mind, perhaps one of the greatest genetic pools in the world, where people from all Mongols, Scythians, Huns, Central Asians, they've all walked in, they've all mixed with people here. It's become a huge genetic pool. And its population has kept on changing. But resistance is a necessity there. The gate has to be resistant to anybody coming in, right? You can settle down in the house. There would be a bedroom, there would be a lounge room, there would be a study, there would be all that in the house. But what does the gate do? The gate has to resist and protect. So that is the nature of things in Punjab. And it is important to see it because one of the reasons why I wrote the book was because though I'm Punjabi, I was born in Odisha. And I grew up for part of my schooling in Punjab, but then I left during the militancy days. And it was 25 years after militancy, and I had gone to see that, okay, guns have fallen silent, but has peace returned? And I found a huge disquiet in Punjab. But everything that they are doing, whether it is their music, or it is their langar, or it is their gurdwaras, or it is their Punjabiyat, which includes the Hindus and the Muslims and a composite society, are all acts of resistance against the power hegemony of the times. And this is something that people need to say. There is a central theme to what I went and found. It was this resistance. And resistance actually is integral to humankind, also to all life form, to everything. I mean, we are talking on the computer, it is sitting on a chair, on a table, and this table has legs. Gravity should pull everything down and suck it into the hole, right? But these things are resisting gravity. So friction and resistance are essential to life. And Punjab epitomizes it.
That's a very interesting answer, Aman, because as you were talking about this idea of resistance, I was wondering, okay, so you're saying there's something about being Punjabi which is associated with resistance. You're saying that there's an aspect of protection and there's an aspect of richness simply because the kinds of people who've passed by Punjab over the years. It happens in both directions, right? Like, do you feel like Punjabis as a site of resistance are resisting in all directions or resisting in one direction or the other? When you say power hegemony, are you referring to the governance of Punjab? Are you referring to something that Punjab is a federal structure in the present? Are you referring to something more historical? Can you just speak a little more about what it has meant for Punjab and Punjabis to resist?
No, well, let's not essentialize. Like though I said that this is the core, but let us not
Right.
essentialize Punjab is
Right.
only.
No, of course. Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
So
I'm sure.
yeah,
Mm,
because that would be flattening.
mm,
It would take away all the nuance from what is happening.
mm.
But
Right.
the fact is that the region has hardly been governed by itself for 3,000 years now, right? Democracy is very
And
new. It is just 70 years old in India,
yeah.
at least. And we have had
Mm,
various formations before. We had dynasties, we had tribalism, we had hunter-gatherer, we had all sorts of things.
mm,
So it does resist power hegemony, as in when any power center, whether it was Samarkand when Babur came, or whether it is Delhi when Akbar was there, it resisted being appropriated by them, being assimilated into them. It continued to carve itself as a region. And we must remember
mm,
that it is not this Punjab we are talking about, which is in India. It is just
mm,
this Indian Punjab is 1/7 of the large Punjab that was, right from
mm,
Delhi up to Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, like so.
mm,
Um, so that Punjab, which was 3,000 kilometers long and 1,500, 2,000 kilometers wide, that Punjab
mm,
has been a land of battles,
mm,
and resistance is not only to the top of the power pyramid. The resistance is also to the jagirdar. It is also to the landlord. It is also to
mm.
anybody who wants to own these people. You know,
Right.
they have been seeking a certain freedom, and that seeking of the freedom has been a cycle that has been going on in the land for. And again, this is Punjab because of its geography and history. It could be
Mm,
as well true for many other places in the world and in the country also. You know,
right.
they would have
Right.
something else which also makes it important. This, I think, makes Punjab important. That is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. Lakshmi, how would you talk about what you think you've learned about your work that you think everyone should know? And it's interesting to ask you this question because such a wide array of things you could pick from. So I'll leave you to do the picking.
Interesting thing that the world should know. What can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, what aspect or what have you learned? What fundamental truths have you learned over the course of your work that you think everyone in the world should know? Whether you were to pick your work with communication, with waste pickers, with children, with libraries, of all of these things, what have you learned over the course of your work life that you think everyone should know?
Hmm. God, heavy question. Huh? uh, uh, okay, I'll largely talk about, I think, my current work with children, which is that, I mean, for those people who don't know, maybe I can give a line or two now to
Yes,
talk
that's
about
right.
my work.
Now we can. Now, see, now we can talk about work with great joy and pleasure. So feel
So,
free to talk about it.
I work with an organization called Hasiru Dala, which is an organization, it's an NGO that works with informal waste pickers and also informal waste workers, scrap dealers and all that. So I basically work with the children of the waste workers, and I run different children's programs, at the heart of which is a library program, which is a community library program. Where we set up small community libraries, almost like a room to read, in communities where waste workers live. And currently, we have three libraries. The one is in Bangalore, one is then in Mysore, and in Tumkur. And yeah, so these libraries are spaces where children come every day after school. They are open for 3 hours every day. We don't take a break at all. And we read, we sing songs, we do theater, we do music, we create, we bring try to bring literature alive. Because with most children that we're working with, many of them are have high levels of absenteeism or are dropouts from school. So the primary thing that we try doing, and which I guess is what I have learned, is every time we think about working with children from disadvantaged communities, we're always looking at the easy fix, which is okay, they're not going to school, so they haven't gone to school for 10 years. Let's just put them in school and things magically will happen. Or they don't have this, and then there are lots of people trying to fix materialistic things, or to make these very quick fixes. um, but I think what gets forgotten is that for any learnings to occur, it's very important to understand where that child is socially, emotionally, and at a personal level where that child is. Unless we work at that, which is sort of the bedrock for any sort of learning, for the child to feel safe in a place of learning, no true learning happens. So our attempt has been in trying to create that. And um, and I think the earliest lesson I learned in the library was to go really slow. And and there is a lot to learn in moments of quietness and in slowness than what you can do with all this. And that's another thing that you see with every kind of work that happens with children. It's terribly animated and a lot is happening and that and this, and there's too much happening. But sometimes you feel that the biggest connect and learning happens in spaces of quiet.
It's very interesting. So, can I ask you how you came to decide that the library was the right level of intervention, as opposed to tuition classes or, maybe working with food, nutrition, health, playgrounds? Well, I mean, we all have our answers for why we love libraries, but I'm very curious to know how you came to that decision and why
Yeah.
you work on that. What is it about libraries that enables this?
Yeah, for us, beyond everything, library is a place of we're looking at a place for organizing children. That was our
Mm,
primary need. That
mm.
even before we start working with children, we need to organize children. So what are the ways in which you can meaningfully organize children? So
What do you mean organized children?
organize children in the sense.
When you said organized, I immediately thought of unions. I was like little
Thought of
children
what?
going around, little unions, trade unions with
Yeah,
children just
also that, also
participating.
that children have to fight for their rights right now.
I agree. I agree. But so how do you mean organizing? Because organizing is such an odd word. You've been talking about slowness, and suddenly there's this management term of arranging, placing students in a certain configurations. I'm very
No, I
curious to
don't
know
mean
why
in
you
the
said
sense of
organizing.
certain configuration or having to.
Right?
There is a power in both. One is in terms of
Mm,
when we want to any of these units that you see, whether it's a school
mm,
or any kind of a program. Primarily, they are bringing a bunch of kids together in some sort of a organized fashion, right? And the, that organizing is important, and also in the context that I am speaking about is also difficult because these are children of informal workers. Many of them are migrants. So I'm coming from
mm,
the context of that these are children who
mm,
speak frequent movement. So bringing them together in some organized fashion is the way is from where I was coming from. Was primarily important because, and that was
mm,
one thing that we were seeing, that the kids are there, they're in the community, they're hanging around. Some kids know each other, some kids don't know each other. It was all scattered. How do we bring kids together? And then we
mm.
we we go on a journey with them, along with them, and then figure out what is happening. So one of the
You're
first
right. So,
things was to
mm,
organize, right?
mm,
So
mm,
and that's when we thought that tuition, the demand obviously was for tuition classes. Like even when we started the library, we remember that many of the parents actually pulled their children out of, a few of them who are going for tuitions, pulled them out, saying you don't need to go to tuitions because free tuitions have started. So
mm,
one is that the community and most people do not know what a library is, so they had never heard about the
mm,
library. So so the need to bring it as a library program, and as a library that is alive, and not in the library how we've seen is shh, don't talk, read
Mm.
books, don't lift your head,
Yeah.
don't talk to your friend, not that kind, but a library that's a space for children to feel safe and meet people, find different worlds. And books are
Mm.
great way to find different worlds and meet different
Right.
people, right?
Mm. Mm.
So that's why we thought that. So I, when we decided this, I went, also traveled a bit around India to look at different ways in which children are being organized. And
Mm.
community library was something that I was really driven to, and because I was
Mm.
personally also interested in libraries, libraries have changed my life. Um, so for me, I was really drawn to that idea. So and then I started to look and look at how, what kind of, what is the kind of impact a library can have. And I fortunately saw a
Mm.
few projects and programs which were very interesting, and which I thought,
Mm.
because these questions of a library for children who don't read, what,
Right.
how
Mm.
is that useful, you know uh, and
Where do you begin?
how when
Where do
we
you begin?
started when we started about
Right.
50% of our children could not read. So
Mm.
why build a library for children who can't read? These were the
Mm.
questions. So then,
Mm.
why is a library meaningful? What
Mm.
can a library do? So
Mm.
our primary goal in the first couple of years was to help, and for ourselves and for the children, to fall in love with stories. It was not about books, it was about stories, and what you meet and encounter in a story, to get to really be amazed and curious about that. So that's why libraries.
Right. This, I mean, thanks for sharing it, because I really feel like books are such an equalizing enterprise. And in an earlier episode, we had the founders of, it was, we had the founders of the Kosi Nook Library, which runs in Kurumanga, and they have a few others, there's Sudeshna, Anita, and Radhika, who turned up here. So you spoke a lot about the love for stories and libraries back then as well, So the idea that anyone can have so much access to magic is a really fascinating thing, and that any child can have access to this, I think, is should be a fundamental right to
It
for every
is,
child.
and it is.
Mm.
UNCRC, when they have, if you look at the rights, primary rights of children, children need to have the right to, art and culture and literature. That is their right.
Right.
Many times
Yeah.
in countries like ours, which are still developing, we look at it as luxury. It is not. And what we are doing is just, providing and facilitating what is already their right.
I agree. And, even if it's not a right, how can we not live in a world which doesn't have enough libraries and museums and parks, and public spaces? If you don't have spaces which spark off curiosity and wonder, then what kind of society are we creating, really? I mean, I think we, as a society, I don't feel like we prioritize the arts enough as something to enjoy as much of as we can. So, I mean, that you're working in that space is really nice. Lakshmi, we'll come back to you for the next question. I want to ask you what you've seen evolve in the behavior of children over the course of the time that you've been working with the library. How have you seen children evolve over the time of using the library? I understand that it's become a space for expression, a space for encountering stories, but can you tell us a little more about what you've seen it do to them um, at a human level, and also I wonder if a systematic level is another direction of it. But do you how do you think about progress and evolution in a child's educational journey or life journey as well?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of things that you look at it as signs of milestones, actually, and when
Mm.
you feel that something has shifted here. For example, one occurred when you start seeing children very organically taking ownership, like it becomes like a space that they own, it is theirs. It
Mm.
is not on us. They are not looking at us as we are getting this space through them. It is our, and full stop. And that's great. That's a great space to be in, because they are we they see then us in what we are rightly are, just facilitators, because that space is theirs. But that to reach that point is a slow but beautiful journey, because each child has to reach that space to feel that it's that child owns that space. That is one. Two is to look at everything that is there is their own, but also shared. So that kind of a thing, that this book is mine, but also everybody else's who comes here. So I need to look at it with respect. I need to treat it with respect and take responsibility. You'll see this very subtly each time going through those milestones, and those are interesting milestones to see, and children journey through that. For example, we always had like the spaces that we work with, children have and adolescents have issues with drug abuse or substance use, and we've always had our doors open for all children. So there are children who come and they might have been beaten up at home, or might have picked up a fight. They might be high on things, but they still have a space to just come and sit. Even if they're not reading, they're not doing anything, they can just come and sit and feel safe. And that is a huge milestone for us. That is to know that a child feels that even if there's no space anywhere else to go, I can come here and just sit and be. The others are in terms of what, like I was saying, organizing what it can do. For example, last year when this floods happened in Kodagu and in Kerala, so these are kids from Mysore Library. The library session was over, and the library is also a place to talk about what's happening in the world, So there was a discussion. So the last half an hour, 1 hour is just for questions and stuff like that. And people start off in discussion, children discuss and all that. And they don't get that space anywhere else in the community or in the school. The school doesn't facilitate spaces like that. So there were questions about the floods and all of that. And then they apparently went back home. And some of them were watching television, and they saw this rescue operation of a pregnant woman on a helicopter, and they were very touched by it. And the library gets over at 7:30 in the evening. So they called for an immediate meeting, all the kids themselves, and they decided to raise money. And they went door to door and collected. And this is a waste because community, remember. And they raised about 5,000, 6,000 rupees that night itself. And then next, we had no clue, So, and they also saw that some cable TV channels office is converted into this space where they're collecting, these relief material, So they made a note of everything. They need biscuits, they need water, they need blankets and all of that. And next morning, they caught hold of parents who took them to the market and bought all of these things. And by the time the librarian reached the library, they were all standing in front of the library with all the relief material, saying that we don't want the library today, take us to this place where we need to donate this. That is our library session. So, wow. Yeah, so this is what libraries can do, this is where when we come together with children, they know that they can change the world too. And it becomes a space that, and many times you don't need an adult to say that. It comes from children, and that's, you just have to facilitate.
So. I can't agree more with the idea that children really have the answers to most aspects of empathy. They take a little more time. I feel they can be cruel as well, but like for most parts, you can't imagine these kinds of acts of beauty in advance. It's not something you can plan for. It's not something a spreadsheet can truly capture. So, Aman, I want to come to you now and ask you a little bit about this idea of.
Can I interrupt?
Yeah. Yes, please.
But you just talked about children getting together and collecting and donating funds for relief. We could also do our pitch for relief, for the reason why we are doing this call,
Absolutely. Usually we do that a little later. We're very happy to do this right now. Yeah, I agree. The main reason why we started these conversations was because we felt like there's an interesting transaction here. The fact that we can have an interesting and insightful conversation about something like this is quite nice. And given that most of our media is run by interests that we don't understand, the cost of doing something like this is nearly nothing, right? The transaction here is that the value of whatever is created is also meant to be a call for showing kindness towards something else, And here we're doing a series of fundraisers in the context of COVID relief. In the first 2 seasons, we supported social security for migrant workers, food security for the urban poor, and protective gear for people who make the strangers who run a city, right? And now we want to support artists and artisans. The reason why we want to support artists and artisans is because like the you might survive, but art gives you a reason to want to survive. It gives you a reason to want to live and find some beauty and joy in life. And this season has been particularly hard for artists because everyone thinks of art as a luxury. But I can't imagine a world without art, and I feel that's much the same for several others. In fact, there's an art to every aspect of your existence, and COVID has hit artists really badly. We're raising money so that we can, have enough food kits and other kinds of relief equipment for people who work in that community. Producers, not producers, production crews, stage hands, people who work on sets, on traditional folk art forms, so on and so forth. We're raising money basically so that we can support people who do this. We'd encourage whoever is here to contribute whatever you might on mail on Swiggy or Zomato tonight in this direction, because any amount that you contribute will be immensely useful. And yeah, we'd love for you to participate. Aman, Lakshmi, do you want to say something about what art means to you and why you felt compelled to participate in this exercise? Because again, I feel like this is a really big question, but how do you think about art in the context of survival? Because a lot of people have been asking us a couple of things. One is this, it seems like there are such big medical things to take care of, many infrastructural and functional aspects to take care of. But is art really doing anything in the context of relief? And I found this. This is a question that's angered me a bit for my own reasons. But I'd love to hear from you about what you think the place for art and artists at a time like this is, and what attracted you to it.
Aman, you want to? Is art essential? Is the question.
That's
art essential. Is commodity like the government defines it.
Yes, exactly. Aman, do you want to take that? It would be lovely to hear you that.
Well, writing is essential for me. Like if I did not have writing, I would die. If I can't say what I want to say, I'll choke. So there is no doubt in my mind that if writing is art, then art has to be done. And there are many, many other forms of art. I know the same for musicians. I know the same for painters, for sculptors, for various kinds of people. And art is life. If you don't have art, you're done. I'm very glad. Migrant workers, of course, huge catastrophe. We overlaid our coronavirus catastrophe with a migrant worker catastrophe in India, and it was very, very wrong. And they must be helped. Daily wagers must be helped. That's the kind of work Lakshmi's organization did a lot. But artists, yes, definitely. And crafts people, there are no census, but there are around 13 lakh people involved in the arts, in the craft sector of the country. And they need help. Their orders are cancelled. They get no advances. They can't buy raw stock. Even if the coronavirus goes away, it will take them like 3 years to come back to the market. And what will happen to them in the middle of it? So art is very essential. It's as essential as food.
Yeah. I agree. Lakshmi, do you want to add to that? Do you want to talk about, because you've actually done so much work in relief in the context of being on the ground and working with it. So it'd be lovely to hear your perspective on this question of essential, as you mentioned.
I closely link art with mental health, my own. This is personal. And I think art and whether it is music or films or kind of art we consume, even if it is a small rangoli that on in front of everybody's house, um, if it is paintings, it's what gives you relief. It's a different kind of a
Mm,
relief. It's what holds you, and it's what gives you strength. It's
mm,
what triggers transformation. And for me, that's, I mean, what do we do if I mean, food is essential, but what about mental health, and where we are as people, isn't that important as well? So art is beyond essential for me.
mm,
And I think it is especially during these really, really difficult times that we need art, and for ourselves, and to be able to, and to for ourselves to take it, I mean, to enjoy the art, not always enjoy, but also to, interact with art, but also to express, and to create art. um, Interestingly, I mean, I and it's so fresh in my mind, so I want to share it, and it's also related to relief work. My organization Hasrudala was doing a lot of relief work in terms of giving ration kits and medical help and all of that. About
mm,
50,000 families we supported during COVID times, 2.5, 3 lakh people. And we every 17th of June, which is Environment Day, is also Hasiru Habba, which is basically a congregation of waste pickers. Over 1,000 waste pickers from across Karnataka come, and it's a solidarity, and it's a show of strength, and it's to show that we exist and we are not invisible people. And we also create these memorandums where we chart out what are the needs of waste pickers, and give it to policymakers and government officials and all of that. Unfortunately, this time we couldn't do that. And an important aspect of Hasiru Habba is a Rangoli, thing that all the women come, and it happens in Freedom Park, and the whole of Freedom Park is filled with Rangolis, because the women come with colors and they're all dressed up like they're coming to a wedding, and then there's beautiful Rangolis. So we were really sad that this time that was not happening, because color and art is such an important, and part of aesthetics is such an important part of our lives. Beauty is such an
mm,
important part of our lives. So when then we decided that if we can't do it together, we will still do it. So we encourage and gave out word that like whoever wants to have, even if it is just white powder, it's okay, but let's do the rangolis. Find whatever you want to find, like flowers, whatever you can find. Let's do the rangolis.
mm,
And it happened. Over 1,000 women participated. And women, children, family members, men, all of them made rangolis full of colors in front of their homes, and sent us pictures. And it's really moving to see the spirit, and what creating art together as a family during this time. And it was their way of saying thank you to everybody who contributed, everybody who made an impact to their lives. So, in small ways or big, but it's to say that we are here to share beauty. And I think art is then definitely essential for our being.
yeah, I mean, I can't agree more with that. Thanks for sharing that. It was really beautiful. Aman, I want to hear more about the sentiment that you just described. Like, your life would be nothing without being able to write, you know. It sounded very serious when you said it like that, and I do feel like you were sincere about the fear that you were feeling. Not really the fear as much as the intensity of feeling that you were conveying when you said that. And I want to ask you two questions. So one, I want to ask you about what your relationship with writing is, and what do you want to convey? What would you want to convey to a reader, and the way someone should encounter your work? And the second thing I want to ask you, which I was about to ask you after Lakshmi's previous point, was on how you thought about Punjabiyat. This is, I've wondered what it has meant, but I want to hear from someone who knows something about it, because my own notion of like Punjabiyat is so stupid. It's only based on like stereotypes that I've encountered. I feel nothing beyond that. And I've noticed recently that I have a lot of Punjabi friends, and I really love them. They're really wonderful people. But it's not enough for me to know what Punjabiyat is. So can you please talk about both of these things? One, your relationship with writing and how someone should encounter your work. And second, this idea of Punjabiyat.
Let's start with the second one first. To remind me about the first question.
Don't I?
So, Punjabiyat, as I'm taking off from where we sort of paused last time, is here is this region, this large region, which is in between the East and the West. It is in between the Orient and the Occident, right? Our whole knowledge systems are flowing from Orientalism or Occidentalism, Western rationality, Eastern Vedas, and the Vedas are composed here in Punjab. Some of our classic works are, and I'm talking about the large Punjab region, which even like current Uttarakhand is part of that, Nepal is part of Nepal is part of that, So in this large region, which actually has been a font of knowledge for thousands of years, the latest offering is the religion I'm born into, which is a Sikh religion. But the land has been fertile, immensely fertile, and also in war all the time. So, and this is also, remember, this is, I think the Indus Valley civilization is the second oldest civilization in the world. So it is this geography which we are talking about. So Punjabiyat to me means all that, And this, what we have got into now, India has got into it more actively post the 90s, into a religious identity battle. Punjab was there in the 70s, 80s, and that's why I also thought that in some ways what happens, they say different regions have different things to say about themselves, but I do feel that what happens in Punjab then happens in India. And exactly the crisis Punjab was going through, now India is going through that crisis. But Punjabiyat here is, if you were to give me two words to answer your first question, what are two things people should remember, then I would have added the eclectic nature of the people of Punjab. They are not bound. They're not bound by religious identity alone. They're not bound by linguistic identity alone. They're not bound by caste identity alone. They're not bound by anything alone. They constantly are in the middle of various things. So the Sikhs are going around with dhagas on their hand, which is basically a Hindu thing. And they're going to the dargah and they're praying for whatever, a better crop or this thing or that. And the Hindus are going to gurdwaras. And there is a town like Malerkotla, which is prominently a Muslim town, which was left untouched in 47 and after, because supposedly it had Guru Gobind Singh's blessings, So this eclectic nature of Punjab is very important to understand this large geographical region that is now, unfortunately, very unfortunately, divided into two nations who have been at war with each other ever since they were formed, India and Pakistan. And that line cuts through Punjab's heart.
Yeah.
So to understand Punjabiyat is to understand this phenomena of this place. And I honestly went to thinking that I'll write a book quickly. I had a book proposal already, I'll spend time traveling, I'll get my book and I'll come out. And I realized it's an ocean. And I just fell deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And it is, I still don't know. I now can say I know almost nothing about Punjab. It's a project for many lifetimes for anybody to actually understand all the vibrancy of the land, all the upheavals that happen there. And imagine it is like in between Himalayas and the deserts, right? Look at the contrasts there, right? So eclecticism of Punjabi is something very essential to the people again, and you cannot slot them. And this is the beauty of it, because it does not fall either the Manusmriti, which now sadly India is it's coming out that it is following that. We have a constitution, which is a much, much better document, or it does not fall into the binary of the Western rationality either, which makes the self and the other. Punjab is always many selves. There's always many.
Aman, can you give us some examples of that? Because I'm hearing you, I'm trying to understand what that means, or how to how do we make sense or something like that. When you say, can you tell us a few things? What were a couple of things that surprised you deeply when you were researching the book, and what you learned while writing it? Is that too big a question when
No,
you
it's
say
not too
something
big a
about many
question.
cells?
No, it's not too big a question. It is hard to answer because it is actually nebulous. It is actually um, it is below the surface. The sense of being many things at one time. And if you actually look at the larger world, you will realize many of us are like that, but we don't just admit to it. So, for example, you can't slot me only as male, Sikh, Jat. You know, those are not the only identities I have. I have an identity of Malwa, which is the region of Punjab, where Punjab is various regions. I have an identity actually. My mother tongue, if there is some, it is actually Odia, perhaps, because I was born in Odisha. You know, so this is how every Punjabi is, and that is why they are like JavaScript, in the world, and that's why when they travel all over the world, they just go and integrate themselves to any culture anywhere, and they thrive as migrants. The reason is they are made like that. It's
Wait,
like
1 second. Did you say JavaScript?
Yeah.
Are you talking? Aman, I just got a bit confused. Are you talking about JavaScript as in a computer language JavaScript? Okay, fine. Because
like
I was.
it fits in with the Windows OS, it fits in with the micro.
Okay. This. I was.
Like things like that.
I was just not okay. No, JavaScript is used for front-end code, so it is used in many different contexts. To that extent, I agree with you, but I was just very surprised with the use of that metaphor for integrating.
Immense diaspora from Punjab. I mean, okay, there is one Punjab, but then there are this immense diaspora. In fact, in some ways, I'm diaspora. I'm in a mixed marriage. I'm with a marriage with a Malayali who is born 3,000 kilometers away from Punjab. We don't share any affinity. But the Punjabi people are massively adaptable. They are massively, malleable. They can be, and that is why nation states have also been using them. So it is everything here in Punjab it's a shape-shifting creature. You can't really pin Punjab down to anything, and that is the beauty of it as well. There is, of course, when you now say, okay, the Sikh identity alone, or you raise, the caste, the Jat versus Dalit identity, or you raise the gender identity. But look at the great poets of Punjab. Look at Gurbani itself, the text of the Guru Granth Sahib, it is all feminine. So there is this beauty, and there is very rooted feudal patriarchy practiced on the ground in Punjab. So this is the contradictions in which, if you were to give me a third word to say, how should people know Punjab? So resistance, eclectic, and contradictions. And everything about Punjab is in these things. So anyway, coming back to my relationship with writing, because
Hey, Aman, can you just hold up on this question? I want to ask both of you a question, which this last point that you made just struck off, right? So both of you work in context of conflict, and Lakshmi, certainly, I feel like I haven't even begun to address the fact that you're talking about children of waste pickers, right? We are not even so far. We've just been talking about the experience of libraries in the first place, and Aman has been speaking about thinking about conflicting areas, resistance, those kind of points, and adaptability. Can you just tell us a little bit about how both of you have seen conflict shape the communities that you work with? In what ways it informs and feeds back into the community that you work with? And then we can get deeper. We can get back to this question on writing. We can just explore this thread a little more and then come back to it. Is that okay? Aman, can you go first? It would be nice to hear, because we're just making this point about contradictions. How do you feel like Punjab of 2020 is shaped by the conflicts that you've observed over, few centuries, much longer than that? But even more recently, over the last few decades.
Over the last few decades, let us look at it. And there are three main conflicts that have happened since the 1920s to the 2020s. First is the big conflict of partition of Punjab. Overnight, people are divided from each other on religious lines. Uh, um, I mean, it is just the coronavirus migrant exodus numbers, which has doubled the numbers of that time. But at that time, it was 14 million people displaced, 1 million people dead. Now we have studies that are saying that 2.2 to 3 crore people migrated during this coronavirus thing. But so partition was a huge, huge blow to Punjab. But it was very strange because people just suppressed what they went through. A whole generation lived by suppressing. Now that the children of that period are octogenarians, and they are most likely going away from us, that suddenly there is a renewed interest in partition stories and oral histories of partition. But this was the biggest conflict that happened. Then the other big conflict, and this is, you see here, contradiction, how it works, is that the Green Revolution, which has fed India, I can proudly say that. 60% of our grain used to come from Punjab, which is 1.5% of the nation's land. And this bumper harvest, this bumper crop, this pesticide, fertilizer driven hybrid seeds production has cost Punjab a lot, because illness, the depreciation of the water table, and because of division of land in families, now more and more and more small and marginal farmers who aren't able to keep up even a very bare minimal lifestyle for themselves, and 83% of them are submerged in debts. This is how you see the contradiction. Something that fed the nation is today itself, perishing. So this was the second big conflict. And the third big conflict was the militancy years, which is what this book talks about. It also talks about Green Revolution. But the militancy years have, again, nothing came out of them. Nothing whatsoever. Wherever the issues were in 1978, before that in 1973, and then when Punjab goes into militancy and thousands die, thousands are abducted, thousands are extrajudicially killed, and at the end of it, all those issues are still standing 50 years later.
So, Aman, for those of us who don't have any context to it, can you just share a little more about what the issues of the militancy were?
Those issues were primarily to do with water distribution of the rivers that go through Punjab. Haryana and Rajasthan also claim that water. You will read my argument why I think, as a national resource, of course, everybody needs water, but they don't have a right on it. And as a national resource, then various other things are needed by various other states, and those are not given to us free. I mean, states charge for coal, states charge for electricity. So why should water be free? So water was one of the reasons, but there were other reasons as well. And the resolution, that what I'm talking about, you have disappeared, but I hope we are live. Yeah.
You are live, you're audible. I was just rearranging for a moment. Sorry.
Yeah, so the other big issue was at that time, and this was an issue which the DMK government in Tamil Nadu had also brought up, was center-state relations. More equitable relations between the centers and the state. And they put them all aside, and look where we are today, into a much more centralized governance, and terribly, terribly affected by this latest contagion. And I think we have moved backwards on federalism, which is a promise of the Constitution of India. And then there were issues related to, which became issues of homeland, and which became issues also of the desecration of the Golden Temple, the assassination of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, and the anti-Sikh pogrom, and general failure of law and order in Punjab, some of it backed by Pakistan as well. But all of that cost Punjab so much of our people died, and we didn't achieve anything from it. So in my mind, that militancy period, what's called the Khalistan period, became a non-movement, you know, and we paid the price for it. It was conflict. So we started by answering conflict, but what I would really have been pushing in my book as well is that if we want to address Punjab's concerns right now, we need to evolve a post-conflict framework to look at Punjab. We can't look at it as conflict, conflict, conflict again. That is what politicians do. They keep looking at Punjab as conflict and they don't propose solutions. We need to actually look at Punjab as post-conflict, then solutions will come to us.
You're right. Do you have a suggestion for what a post-conflict imagination for Punjab would look like? And
First
then
we have to have some form in which we choose a government which does not, play by vote politics. It does not play.
That's for the entire nation.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say anything about it because, I almost feel like formal systems of governance are not offering enough to feel compelled or comforted by for the sake of our collective evolution and thriving at this point in time. So I really feel like the place to begin is a matter of empathy and understanding each other. So I'm not even looking at this from a governance point of view as much as what does it mean for me as an Indian citizen to associate with this imagination of Punjab that you can share more about based on the fact of your expertise and concrete relationship?
There are two things here. One is that as a writer, my job is to articulate the issues, not get into solution finding mode.
Of course.
And what the book has contributed, and if I can answer it, is it has at least tried to create a discourse around these various narrow myopic ways in which we were looking at Punjab all the time, only from the religious point of view, only from the political, only from the economic point of view, or only from this bhangra, balle balle, or only from food point of view. I'm like trying to, let's have a holistic, a map of what is going on here. So that is what the book has tried to do. But post-conflict, if we have to, and I'm not a solution provider, but if I have to say two or three things, first thing is to acknowledge. To acknowledge that whatever the book is saying is true about the state. Readers are acknowledging it, but would the power that be, would they ever acknowledge it? That is a question, But if we acknowledge it, then we don't just merely say sorry, but we actually follow through on all the things that have gone wrong, at least in terms of the extrajudicial killings that happened, and that would restore the people's faith in the system. Yes, a couple of thousand policemen might have to be axed, or some of them might even do jail because they got untimely promotions and rewards for carrying out those killings. But overall, people will be able to trust the system. That is so important. Right now, there's a trust deficit, right? And look at how it plays out. I mean, like recently, I'm sorry, this is political. This was supposed to be a party kind of talk, no? I mean, what is happening here? I mean, like, hello.
This is the Khalistan party.
No.
What am I supposed to do? Like you say all of these serious things, then we have to ask you serious questions.
Yeah. No, but let me just conclude quickly that because this can go on and on. Is that acknowledgement is important, and following that acknowledgement is important. So if you understand that Punjab's agriculture has suffered so much, then would you actively help us build cooperative farms? And would you give us long, without interest loans so that people can overcome their hardships? Would you actually forego the loans that they have taken when you forego loans for industry? Why would you forego loans here? And would you actually not use then this intervention of yours to move away from pesticides and fertilizers and break about organic farming in Punjab? So there are the immense possibility of actions that can happen. The point is, will somebody do it? Okay.
I mean, I don't think the will somebody do it really seems like a secondary question from what you're saying right now, and I do feel like the challenge right now is just to understand it and acknowledge it to a certain extent, and we'll see maybe whatever has to come subsequently is a function of
Read
our
my
existence.
book. Read my book.
Is this how you do book talks, Aman? What will people think? I get bullied into buying 10 copies, which I'm going to do
And
promptly.
he's written such a mammoth book. It's like so big. He's like, read the book, otherwise I'll kill you. Tongue.
with the book, in fact. So Lakshmi, can I ask you the same question? What does it feel like to be working in a site of such immense conflict? How do you feel about it, and how do you feel about the outcome of working in conflict? I can't imagine how hard it is for anyone. I actually don't know enough about anything to comment on it. But what is your experience of working in this, working just in a site which is so painful? Like, what is that like? Because everything you've been speaking of so far it's been colorful and rosy and wonderful. But the site of pain, a site of transformation, a site of deep injustice, is really the precursor to the beauty that you're creating, right? So can you tell us about that?
So my site is 3,000 kilometers away from Aman's, which is almost 2,000 or so. And the realities of a state like Karnataka is very different from the realities of a state like Punjab, And of course, it has not seen partition. It has not seen those kind of terrorism years. It has not seen that kind of green revolution. But we've had our own issues. And even to take, and my site has largely been Bangalore, right? The way Bangalore has gone in the last 15 years itself is a site of conflict. How it has I don't know, transformed. I don't know if it seems to be a very positive thing to say, but really gone to the dogs in many ways. In terms of how without any plan or anything, it has developed and what it has caused to the people here. So the children and the communities that I work with are poverty is the site of conflict. So huge. And it is of not having dignity for the kind of labor that they do, which is one of the most. So one would always wonder, why is an informal waste picker who's like a rag picker not a beggar? Is because he wants to work. He will still go put his bare hands into muck that we throw and still take out recyclable material and go and make sure that things that you are throwing, without any cause or concern, that reaches a recycling space. So in many ways, he is an environmentalist. He or she, most of rag pickers are, for me, they are green environmentalists. They are the people who work at the lowest and lowest level of recycling, So it is to not be acknowledged for these decades of work that they have done, walking about 20 to 30 kilometers every day through these trafficked roads, through the garbage, making sure that so Bangalore close to produces 5,000 tons of waste every day, and waste pickers are putting their hands through at least half of it. So in different forms, whether they're sorters, we have this sort of people who are doing this. And the largest gap there is in terms of recognition and dignity in the work that they're doing. And it has taken so much work to even for people to start looking at them. And most of them it was a site of conflict. Even their occupation was a site of conflict, because half the time people were thinking that they were dogs chasing them, or people were thinking they were thieves, there was police all the time. So, and it's wonderful to see their resilience and their, I don't know what, they're wonderful people, because irrespective of whatever happens, they still go early in the morning. They'll fight the police. They will go and still pick up, recyclables, sell it, and make their daily living. So it's the conflict is a space of resources. The basic, most of them don't have basic facilities of housing. All this we know: housing, education,
Yeah.
children, pension, any kind of ways of living in terms, because they're day-to-day laborers in many ways. So no predictable income. So that is the space of conflict in many ways. But in other communities that I have worked with also have had strange ways of conflict. Now I think of it. One of the communities I worked was in Poland, and I was working with a bunch of kids there. I was at that point a couple of years ago very interested in children in post-industrial towns. And so I had lived for some time in Kolar goldfields, and I had seen what mining can do to children. And especially after a mine has closed down, what happens to that space? How does that space start to disintegrate, and what is its effects on children? So I did a similar project in Silesia in Poland, in a small town called Bytom, which is known in Poland as the poster child of post-industrial conflict region. Basically it is. And it was interesting to do, because I was there doing a workshop with children, trying to see if how can I gather what has been the history of this a small town, which was earlier in with Germany, because it falls on the border. And Hitler was very interested in this town, and he was building this as almost like the mining capital against Katowice, which was in Poland. And so there was this. So architecturally, it's beautiful. It's like really, really. But the thing is that it's such a it's such a scary place that 40% of its livable town is now unlivable because it's falling on your heads. So buildings keep falling.
Meaning?
Yeah, because they're coal mining, no? So they've been digging under the ground. So these buildings no longer are stable. So they keep falling. So, and there are still people living there, children living in these buildings, though they've been marked unlivable because they have nowhere else to go. There's so much poverty there. So you're basically living in a house which can collapse any day, anytime. So there is coal mining written on, and the history of coal mining written on every brick of that city. And when I started to do this workshop, it was very interesting because one of the parallels that I started to see in post-industrial towns was that of a missing generation. So most of the children would not have at least one parent with them because they would have moved from that city, gone off somewhere, or not there. They would be mostly living with uncles or grandparents or something like that, you know. So my workshop's attempt was to, in some way, through family history, trace some aspects of the history of the town. And it was very interesting to see that the grandparents would not talk about it. The children didn't even know that it was, I mean, they knew what coal was, but they didn't know the history of the town. It was like a very deliberate erasure, you know, that they have to erase that those phases. And I'm sure that's truth for many post conflict areas, basically, because this is also the point I'm making is that industrialization and this kind of industrialization and then abandonment of these kind of cities is also crime and conflict.
Because it seems to parallel what Aman was talking about, the kind of conflict that Aman was speaking about just now. So it's
it is to use resources and people of certain places, suck them dry and leave them to die. It is really like that, you know. And then they exist there, not wanting to acknowledge what has happened. So the healing process doesn't start. Because they want a different reality. They want to very quickly move on to another reality, which is not going to come. So the people of Bytom are sitting and waiting for other people to come and start investing in a city that is falling apart.
Right. If you were to find a metaphor in the present moment, what would both of you learn that we can apply now? Because the healing is, I really feel, I'm very, very afraid of what's going to come next. Not just in terms of like the health infrastructure and whatnot. I really feel like we have the capacity to solve for that problem. But I'm concerned about what happens after the pandemic. How do we think about social cohesion, our priorities as a nation? So the question I want to ask you is how do you think about the idea of giving your life to another citizen through your work, through your life, through dignity, other channels. Can you speak about that? How do you see, what is your message to people and the way we conduct ourselves as citizens in the post-pandemic world?
Okay, let me be the writer self and connect it to your earlier question to me, which I found very interesting. How did I come to writing? And because I
This is
I believe that we will. I mean, it might take till October, perhaps till December. We will find a vaccine for coronavirus, but what it has triggered, we do not have any vaccine for it, and that is a shift in the mental health of the country. And that is what is going to be the greatest thing to happen. There is economics, there is sociology, there is jobs, markets, all that is there. But what this period will, what will affect everything is mental health. And that's my take on what is going on right now. It is already affecting us. And when I mean mental health, I don't mean only illnesses. I mean like
Sense of
physical health.
being, yeah.
Like physical health, there is mental health. There are good parts to it, and there are complexes and conditions and illnesses and all that. We are terribly unprepared to deal with it right now in our country. And I'll come back to the same point of post-conflict is we first have to acknowledge that this is happening.
Yeah, but you mean in the form of like loneliness, pain, grief, or do you mean it in the sense of, okay, we finally have the capacity for silence, and what is that bringing up in our systems? Can you say more about how you mean that?
Fear, paranoia, a constant sense of siege on all of us. And this is even beyond the pandemic. This is going on for a couple of years now, that we are all feeling a little under siege. What is it doing to us? What is it doing to our immunity itself? You say the biggest thing that you need against coronavirus is your own immunity. But that's not just physical immunity. You need mental immunity as well. You need a mindful way of living. You need, as Lakshmi started saying, safe spaces. Where are those safe spaces in our society are getting eroded? Right now they are saying that 80% of this virus is transmitting not outside, but inside homes. So home is the safest space that somebody has. Her library is.
Where did you go? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Right. And this is actually what brought me into writing. Also, I'm connecting it because I mean I like my geographical area of work, first book, second book, this third book are all Punjab, but my psychological area of work is actually mental health. My first book was about schizophrenia. The second book was about adolescence depression, and the third book also deals with mental health in Punjab. But I came to writing through it because I was born in a family where my mother was diagnosed as schizophrenic, and I lived under the shadow of it, and I did not know how to get out of it. And then I realized I need not get out of it. I need to be able to speak about it. And it is that effort of wanting to speak about it that led me. I mean, I remember an early youth of mine where I would sit in front of white sheets and cry, not knowing how to write, and I did not know that somebody could teach me writing. I was just a voracious reader, which was an escape for me from the family situation that I had. And then in his wisdom, my father sent me to Panjab to study high school, and there was militancy going on there. So I was like, who is mad? Is my mother mad, or is the society mad, or is the I can't figure out who is mad, who is a threat to me? And why should madness be a threat to you? It is not actually. Because all of us can become, any day our switch can turn. So for me, the need to write comes from wanting to make sense of my life. And that is what I said right in the beginning. I observe, I make sense, and then I try to articulate. But mental health actually brought me into writing. And mental health is very much part of all my writing that I do.
Lakshmi, you want to add to that from right there, because that might be a good point of departure for the same question actually.
What do you think is going to happen after the coronavirus?
No, I mean not so much like that. Because not so much. What do you think is going to happen as much as what should our priorities towards each other be? How do we think about the act of giving pieces of ourselves to each other as we enter into the post-pandemic world? Based on what you've seen in conflict in the world around you right now.
I think one of the things that during this conflict as well, even to be in a space to give, you should be intact. And you need to feel like you are in a place to give, right? So a lot of it is I feel in self-preservation mode. Many of us are, to be able to preserve our own health, physical, mental, our sense of being. I think in many ways we need to find ways to hold ourselves, each other, even during this time, so that post the time that this time we have some sense of being to even start, giving. Because I really feel that this is like there's going to be a PTSD kind of situation for many people, post the conflict.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is in terms of how do we manage, preserve our own self and what we see as self, to be prepared for what is coming up. And I know that post conflict, especially for people who are in spaces like I do, there is a lot of work to be done. And frankly, given the kind of governance that we have and all that, doesn't have to be really articulated, but that's going to be really tough as well, and it is going to be seeing, if we feel that we have seen bad days, there could be worse,
For sure.
So for me, I look at it as a way of trying to hold myself during this period, and some way, in that way, preserve myself to be able to respond to what comes next. So I self-preservation is where I am right now.
It's very courageous of you to acknowledge it in those terms, and for both you and Aman to answer this question from the perspective of how we associate with ourselves, even before we contemplate what it means to associate with another being,
Yeah.
And what would your message to anyone who's thinking about improving the quality of their relationship with themselves be, to evolve in that direction?
I don't know.
Be kind to yourself.
Yeah, be kind. Yes.
And but what could that mean? How can we how could we work on that in a little more systematic way? What do we need? I feel it'll be nice to have a diet of art. Can I request you both to nominate pieces of art you think everyone should encounter?
What?
Can you nominate pieces of art?
I loved your snigger when I said be kind. But now, what did you ask for, Mark?
Nominate of art. What kind of art? What do you want to...
I don't know. What kind of art do you think everyone could encounter to heal in a meaningful way? And how do we? What are the ways in which we can systematically work in the direction of our healing? And we've spoken a lot about acknowledgement. We don't yet know what it will mean in the future to acknowledge what we're going through even right now, right? But if you were to say, okay, so can you say more about this idea of be kind to yourself? I was sniggering a little bit because I was immediately reminded of thought for the day from school, this is the stuff that we would say in an assembly line. And Aman, as a writer, I was like, what, Aman? You can say more than be kind. I agree, yeah, of course. How can you not be kind to yourself? For sure.
No, but it's not that simple. I'm telling you, not people.
No, I am not at all kind to myself. I don't think most of us are not. So can you please say more about it? Yeah.
Wait. Kindness is terribly underrated. And we don't really come to a place where we are willing to forgive ourselves, we are willing to admit to ourselves that, okay, some wrong happened, and it's not the end of the world, we are even, it's even more difficult for us to forgive anybody else who we feel has wronged us. And there is a lot of wrong happening right now, systematically, in a structured manner, and even individually, you know. And if we are going to keep on reminding ourselves of all the wounds and hurts that we are gathering, we are not going to be able to move past. At
Right.
some point, whoever amongst you and us and whoever lives, they will have to be able to move ahead, not sit down and keep wailing about what is going on right now. And that is very important. That is what I mean when I say be kind. Practice
Mm.
kindness, practice mindfulness, because I know these are very abused terms today, like in many ways, but there is nothing else to do. You don't have the vaccine, you don't know the food, you don't know what is going to cure you. If you get it from somewhere or the other, all you will need to do is just breathe, and breathing will be difficult. And when breathing is difficult and you're not getting a hospital bed, if you're going to beat around yourself and say, oh God, I did this, oh God, you are weakening your immune system. You are actually falling prey to the virus. So
Mm.
the kind is actually the most enabling and empowering thing to do in these times and in times to come in the future, I feel personally.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I can't agree more, because I feel it's made it imperative to contemplate how we can live with ourselves, and like, Aman, I have to thank you a lot for like casting it from this perspective of acceptance to begin with, and acceptance not in a violent way, but acceptance as an initiator of possibility, as a point of departure. And do you want to add to that, Lakshmi? Do you have any? What do you think about this question? Like, how do we work on being kind and dignifying ourselves in the direction of healing?
I think it's one of the toughest thing to do. At least it was for me. Like
Mm.
there's so much societal pressure and conditioning to be kind to others, and there is so much value that is given to especially in upbringing like mine, which was very middle class, uh, you know um, uh, father from a government employee. There was a lot of conditioning of pleasing others but yourself, like at the cost of your own um, needs, that you're always pleasing others. I'm not putting it in a black and white zone, but um, even to like it's almost felt like a crime to be kind to yourself at one point when I was growing up, or to listen to yourself and your own heart, because you had the pressure of having to listen to so many people. So for me personally, I still struggle with it, and it is one of the most difficult things to do. But I guess I've gotten better at it over time, and it has really and I think being kind to yourself and being able to forgive and to move on, is to acknowledge, forgive and move on, has been only way one is able to, for me, meaningfully transform. And yeah, so I know that what difference it can make when you are actually kind to yourself.
Like both of you. I find both of you extremely inspiring, because you have no hesitation or fear about speaking so personally about these kind of questions. I mean, it makes it possible to contemplate vulnerability for me, and I'm sure for anyone who's listening in right now. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts for speaking of these things in this way. But speaking of the party, Aman, I feel like we need to end on a smilier note than this, and I really feel like we've done a huge disservice to the joy of our regular conversations by, oddly, for whatever reason, today having an extremely
I'm making his pitch. The
this.
writerly pitch.
Unless
Yeah,
you read,
okay.
Badri, unless you read this book, you're not coming home for the party when I throw it next.
See, we don't know if
No,
the end of the world
Badri,
is
it's
going to.
only wait. It's only
Hey,
540 pages.
That's okay. You have to remember that I have got a degree in law, so I pretend to
Yeah.
keep a lot of big books at home, so that's the extent of my relationship with fat books. Otherwise, it's all pretend to read. But no, Aman, I plan to read it. Last time I came over, you gave me Sapphire Leaves, and I really enjoyed reading it. You even signed a copy for me. I don't know if we had a great night, of course, but we didn't even get to. I mean, any of the things that I thought that we would talk about today, but we had a perspective on how to think about conflict, how to think about empathy, how to think about the world that the conflict is created out of and the world that conflict leaves behind. Because conflict seems almost like this timeless thing which is pervading all aspects of the past and future and present. And that's such a unique perspective on today. It's not necessarily the tonality of the conversation that I imagined or the pace of conversation that I imagined. But thank you so much for speaking to us and spending your time with us.
Thank you,
We'd
Balaji.
love
Thank you
to.
for inviting us.
I know.
Uh,
Like last time our cat had an accident, and this time it's still in the hospital. But we managed to finish the conversation.
Yeah, no, I mean, no, I think we managed to start the conversation. I'm thinking about the next time we can have you. And because, see, there are so many more directions for us to explore, right? Lakshmi, we didn't even start talking about radioactive, and like we didn't even get into any of the conversations that Aman and I had a conversation around. Remember when we met on the terrace the last time at this musical gathering, we were talking about symposia, the idea of like coming together just to pick topics and have conversations about them. And I really feel like there's a lot more conversation left to be had here. You've been, I feel, like foster parents for many, many young artists who really hold you very dear in the city and look up to you a lot. And thank you so much for being who you are and being here with us. We appreciate it very much. And we'll be back for a more bustling chat for sure. So we promise our viewers that. We also promise you that, because we've had many more jumpy conversations. For whatever reason, this didn't feel like one. I guess it wasn't meant to be. And the first step in the path to healing is to stop sniggering, I guess. I mean, like for me, I'm finding that it's easier normal defensive response to circumstance, and it's a good way to not have to acknowledge the difficulty of day-to-day life. And yeah, I mean, so thank you for allowing us to speak in the language of our truth as opposed to our reality, I suppose, a reality or misbehavior in that sense. So anyway, so thanks a lot. So we will be off live now, and